Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time, we left off at Germans on the Pripyat marshes. Today we are on to reshaping the destiny of Europe. Tehran. November 28th, 1943. Planning Allied strategy. With probably one of the most famous photos from the Second World War. The photo of all three of the Allied leaders sitting right here. It's very interesting. And you can kind of tell the differences in them in the chairs they're sitting in. We have, obviously, Stalin. I'll go from left to right here. Before I start reading, obviously, I'm just trying to, point this out. We got Stalin looking in like a more traditional wooden chair. Very simple and plain. We have President Roosevelt in a more metallic kind of chair. And then obviously Churchill in what looks to be almost a lawn chair, but probably like a tea time chair. So very, very British. And then everyone behind him. That one guy messed up. Wasn't looking at the camera. You know, some of these people almost don't even look like they're actually here in this photo. Mostly Molotov, because I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Molotov. He doesn't look real. He doesn't look real. And it's the lighting. Something about the lighting. They look like they were superimposed into this picture almost. Peculiar. But I'll now get on to the reading here. After the Cairo conference ended, the American and British delegates moved eastward to Tehran, capital of Iran. There, for the first time, President Roosevelt met Premier Stalin, and the meeting between these two, Winston Churchill, and the diplomatic and military staffs proved to be one of the most important conferences in history. During the meeting and after it, very little information regarding the discussion was released to the press. A few statements of a general nature declaring that all parties were in accord were given out. But in the following summer, when American and British forces invaded France, it was made clear that the planning had been done at Tehran. A full half year previously, the Tehran session was particularly important when the background of the relations between America, Britain, and Russia is examined. For 2 years, the Russians had been bearing the brunt of the fighting on the continent. They were eager for their allies to open a second front in the West in order that pressure in the East would be eased. Sorry, it was just, the way that was worded was just kind of weird for me. The reluctance of the Americans and British to do this until they were fully prepared and the consequent delay gave rise to the story of dissension between the three powers. At Tehran, these difficulties were ironed out and the time and place for the blow in France decided upon. In the foreground of this picture, from left to right, are Premier Stalin, President Roosevelt, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill. In the background, Harry Hopkins stands behind Stalin. So right there. Yep, that is Molotov right there. Russian's foreign minister is between Stalin and Roosevelt. Anthony Eden. It doesn't say where he is. Britain's secret... Oh, never mind. Anthony Eden is either that guy or this guy. Stands beside Mr. Churchill. So it's either this guy or this guy. I'm not really sure because they're both standing beside him. But yeah, very interesting photo. I'd say this is probably one of the most famous photos from this war. And I just find it so cool because I'd say this is the closest we get to like the idea of almost world peace probably. But to think that these three nations came together at this conference, and they would not see eye to eye with each other much longer after this, really. So it's very sad. But the Pacific Story, November 1943, shrinking the Japanese horizon. After nearly 2 years of warfare, American strength begins to make itself felt. While the shaded area of this map indicates the vast area still under Japanese control, the American flag is flying in many new places. The gains in New Guinea are particularly important. 1 year ago, the Japanese were threatening Port Moresby and were barely stopped in the Owen Stanley Mountains by American and Australian forces. At this date, the danger to Port Moresby has been definitely removed, and the Japanese have lost their two important bases at Lae and Salamaua. The Allies are moving northeast along the coast and are now within bombing range of Rabaul, the Japanese bastion on New Britain. In the Solomons, the Americans have progressed from their hard-won beaches and on Guadalcanal and Tulagi to Bougainville in the north. In the Gilbert Islands, American fighting men have done some more than recapture enemy-invaded territory. The Gilbert Islands had been strongly fortified by the Japanese, who regarded it as one of the most important outer defenses of Truk, their most important base in the South Pacific. Its seizure by Americans was a most important move in any plan of strategy that included either the taking or neutralization of Truk. Chiefly responsible for American successes in the Pacific was a greatly strengthened Navy. By November 1943, the United States fleet had completely recovered from the Pearl Harbor disaster. Those battleships which had been resting on the mud of the harbor had been raised and modernized, and were now operating in both the Atlantic and Pacific. In addition, new ships of all types were now going into action as the Navy's Prodigious building program began to show results. So yeah, we can see all this shaded area, as I talked about, still everything that Japan has control of. So all the way down to New Guinea, here, I believe that's the Philippines. Yes, the Philippine Islands, parts of China, Korea, and then obviously Japan. But you can see here, all this ends right around here. You can see American flag there, American flag retaking the Aleutians, and the American flag down here. It's not showing it yet, but yeah. So the Japanese are being absolutely pushed out of the Pacific, and even at this point, the writing's kind of on the wall. The Japanese are not going to win this. They might think they will, but they're not. There's no way they're going to win this, especially now. Yeah, well, even when they started the war, they knew they could not beat the United States. The idea was just to weaken us to a point where we would just not be able to attack right away, and then just hold on to everything for as long as possible to basically make the American public not want to fight the war anymore. But they couldn't even do that. The progress the Americans make here is fast, and the Japanese are kicked out very quickly. Marines ambushed by Japanese on Bougainville. November 1943. Heroic action in the Pacific. When Marine infantrymen were stopped at this spot, the junction of the Pivia and Numa Numa trails on Bougainville Island in the Solomons, tanks were rushed to the scene. The tank in the picture, upper left, that one right there, carried the unit commander, First Lieutenant Leon A. Stanley of Anniston. Anniston, Allah. A Marine killed by the foe was left in the roadway, and as the tank approached, it struck a jungle vine which stretched across the road and set off a landmine. The tank was disabled, and the crew, armed with submachine guns, climbed out to get the enemy. Lieutenant Stanley was killed early in the action. The crew kept fighting and were joined by Private First Class Robert E. Lansley of Syracuse, New York. Second from the left, a Marine raider and his specially trained dog, Andy. The dog located machine gun nests on either side of the road, and here Lansley is seen drawing the Japanese fire so the Marines could determine if the guns were firing from a fixed position or were firing from free. 3 times Lansley drew their fire before it was determined that the Japanese were firing from fixed positions. In the picture, lower left, so right here, 2 Marines are covering Lansley and firing on the enemy behind the tank, driving them around the right end where Private Lansley picked them off. One of the Marines killed in action is at the extreme left, only his legs are showing. So, I believe it means right here. Hard to tell. Hard to tell where they mean right there. In the picture upper right, Lansley runs back up Death Alley to escape the bullets cracking around him as other Marines hold their fire until he reaches safety. Doesn't look like he's running too much, but yeah, that's supposed to be him running down Death Valley, trying to get back to the Marines, the safety of cover. In the picture lower right, 4 Marines give first aid to one of their buddies as Private Lansley continues his search for the enemy. Shortly after this picture was taken, the wounded man was removed and the Marines took over the enemy's position. While examining the machine guns and other equipment, a Japanese hidden in a dugout, which they had overlooked, threw a hand grenade. Lansley and his buddy, Private First Class John V. Mahoney of Clinton, Connecticut, were wounded, as were 4 other Marines in the group. Despite his wounds, Lansley turned his machine gun on the sniper and killed him. Yeah, so this is one of those stories of like great military heroism. If I wouldn't be surprised if Lansley was very decorated for this. Maybe not, but I wonder if the dog was too. I hope the dog made it out. But yeah, obviously this is pretty great heroism. Heroism. I keep saying, yeah, heroism. Very interesting. But with that, that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a comment. Tell me what I can improve on. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.